So let me get this straight. Hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction is now going to be a weekly show.
Well, pretty much, just as long as you keep doing it.
And all I have to do is to create the stipulation, pick my favourites, record me talking about my favourites, and then post a video.
Just like last week.
Just like last week. And if I do that, you'll leave me alone?
And I'll leave you... No, do you know what? I do always have your best interest though, don't I?
Yeah, you do have my best interests. I hate it when you're right.
Well, I am always right.
Damn, that's the complete opposite to me. I'm never right.
No, I'm you.
Yes, from the future, I know, you keep telling me.
Look, can you just get off the bed and record this episode, please?
Yes, fine. But turn the GoPro off. It's really weird that you insist on recording these segments. We all know that you're just showing off the fact that you can do these editing skills that you've YouTubed.
Ladies and gentlemen, available on all platforms and YouTube. He's the Apex Podcaster. He's the wise owl of professional wrestling. He smells better than Dude Love with Sex Panther on. He's the king of fantasy booking. He is your favorite podcaster's favorite podcast. He is Omega Luke, and you're listening to the Omega Luke Wrestling Podcast.
What is going on, everyone? My name is Omega Luke, and this is episode 2 of Hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction, the game where I create a stipulation for a faction. You come up with a faction within that stipulation, and then I pick my favourites and spotlight them right here on the YouTube channel. And this week is no different, although this could be the last friendly week of Hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. That is right, I am thinking of taking this into an actual competition. I am thinking having a top 5 or a top 10 every week and giving out points in a league format and see how we go season by season to see who can become the Hashtag Fantasy Booking Champion. Already got one of them. The Hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction Champion. There's too many different kind of competitions. So the faction that I laid out for you today is that you have to create a faction with anyone who has held a belt in NXT history. That can be any NXT belt as well. Tag team, women's, NXT champion, North American champion, or the UK championship if you wish to do so. A main roster wrestler over the age of 30, a tag team that has featured for Progress Wrestling at some point. And you have to think about how they fit together and if they would suit being in a faction with each other, because there's no point in just chucking 3 competitors together in a faction. If they don't fit whatsoever, I will just disregard it. Thankfully though, you guys did not disappoint with this stipulation. I had some absolute humdingers, some absolute thunderbastards, pun intended, factions where you guys really thought outside of the box. And I appreciate that. Who doesn't like thinking outside of boxes? So let's begin with the second time we are seeing this lovely lady on Hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. It is Bam in real life, and she has the faction of Sami Zayn, Becky Lynch, and Chris Brooks and Kid Lycos, of course, of CCK. She says I don't really have a name for them, but they would all look great together. Plus, there is a good mix of strong submission and high flying moves. Becky and Sami have great chemistry and work well together. Plus, CCK are a fantastic tag team. And do you know what, Bam? I completely agree. I fucking love CCK. It's a shame that Kid Lycos is injured again. It's also a shame that we haven't seen Sami Zayn in a very long time. But thankfully, the man is still fucking kicking ass, just as well as Chris Brooks is, to be fair, on Progress and Rev Pro. And that is a very good faction, so I thank you once again for featuring on hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. The Don is back. Sound the alarm. Mike Aaron is back with another hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. He took a week off last week to let you guys see if you could come up with better factions than himself. But unfortunately for Mike, this week he did not make it in the top 3. However, his faction was good enough to be spotlighted in this episode, and it goes as follows. The Drew McIntyre NXT champion, the main roster girl over the age of 30 is Becky Lynch, and the tag team of Progress is the current Progress Wrestling champions, the Swords of Essex, Paul Robinson and Will Ospreay. You may have heard of him before, and he's given them the name of the United Kingdom. Did not see that coming, although Becky Lynch, the man, is not actually part of the United Kingdom. Sam Preston is another guy who featured last week in hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction episode 1, and here he is again representing hashtag Team RB Wrestling Blogs, and he begins with the name of International Strong Style, the NXT champion being Shinsuke Nakamura, the 30 plus guy being Cesaro, and the Progress tag team British Strong Style Pete Dunne, Tyler Bate and Trent Seven during the free bird style that we have all come accustomed to with British Strong Style and New Day. All 5 are hard-hitting technical specialists. They win matches by knocking opponents out unconscious and having them 10 counted. Now that would be a very cool way of introducing a faction. Very different style of winning matches. I think that would be a very good storyline too. And I'm quite interested to see whether Sam Preston will pop up every now and then on Omega Luke. Maybe you'll see him doing some fantasy booking in the future, because I know the guy is very talented and can do just that. The Switch Queen is back on Omega Luke. Courtney Summers, of course, my Patreon member, the darling Courtney, and she brings the faction of 3 badasses and a bad lass. Of course, that includes Becky Lynch. That also includes Aleister Black and Mark Haskins and Jimmy Havoc, of course, the Progress tag team. And I think that would be very good. I think the combination of Aleister Black, Haskins and Jimmy Havoc with Becky Lynch just sort of doing all the talking, doing all the bad mouthing and having those 3 being heels, I think would work best in my opinion, and just kicking people's asses. I like that a lot, Courtney. Mike Baker is back once again on Fantasy Booking Faction, and he begins his faction with Sami Zayn and Aleister Black, of course, which could be both the NXT champion and the main roster over 30, because Aleister Black right now is on the main roster. He is also over 30, and he rounds off his faction with the 198. Of course, that is the Wild Boar Mike Hitchman and Flash Morgan Webster, in case you didn't know. And he says he's calling them the subculture, which I really like, with the 3 different combinations of they don't fit into society, they're not considered normal, but they are banded together by the respect of their differences. Subculture. I like the thinking of that one, Mike. Very good faction. Thank you once again for taking part, buddy. My friends from View from the Top Rope have put an entry in, and I very much like it, just missing out on the top 3 here, with the NXT belt holder being Neville / Pac, which probably would have been my choice. Wrestler over 30 of Samoa Joe, and the tag team from Progress, grizzled young veterans, of course, James Drake and Zach Gibson. Liverpool's number 1 showing up again here on Fantasy Booking Faction. And they say the faction would be called the Basterds and would be all about being sick of being overlooked and whipping people's asses viciously. I like that. Very good faction. I could see that definitely working anywhere in the world as a faction. But finally we are here, the top 3. And coming in at 3rd place is my good friends at Why We Watch Pod. Of course, Mags and Mike Errant, who featured earlier in Fantasy Booking Faction. They begin with the NXT title holder of Sin Cara, the main roster guy over the age of 30 being Rey Mysterio, and the Progress tag team of Flamita and Bandido. And if you do not know who they are, you will in the future, because they are incredible luchadors. And he's given the faction name of the Lucha Extremists, the most elite collective of masked wrestlers. And I just really liked how you could do that, because that would be an incredible babyface faction, which you don't see very often. And I think they would work very well together. They all have something very much in common, of course, having a lucha background, all being masked wrestlers. And as much as WWE doesn't really give masked wrestlers a chance, I think that would be an incredible faction where anywhere in the world would steal the show anytime they're on any card. My very good friend Wilfred of the Wilfred Watches podcast has put an entry in, and Wilfred, on your first attempt, you have come second this week, because I fucking love this hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. He begins with Big E Langston. He then continues with Apollo Crews, and he rounds it off with CCK, Chris Brooks, and Jonathan Gresham, who had an incredible tag team match last year against LAX, which featured in my top 5 wrestling matches of 2018. He said the leader would be Big E Langston. No funny business or pancakes. Fuck the New Day. We get the serious Big E, and he brings the best out of Cruz and CCK, and he's called them Lethal Inc. And I really like that. Can you imagine the power that those 4 guys would have? Chris Brooks as a huge guy, Big E Langston even bigger, and the athleticism and talent of Apollo Crews and Jonathan Gresham. I think that would be an incredible faction. I really like it. I think what he has done here is, when I say that, I think you really need to think about how these guys fit together. Wilfred has done this perfectly. I think those 4 guys would fit together perfectly, and this is a perfect hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. But it did not come first, and this week we have a bit of a shock for the first place. Like I said, there is a bit of a shock for first place, and first place goes to 5 Nerds Go and my boy Keith the Chief, because funny enough, they have both entered the exact same hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction, and I love both of them. They're the same, Luke. Of course you like one if you like the other. Both of their factions begin with Andrade, Cien, Almas keeping it tranquilo, the over 30s guys as Gran Metalik, and 5 Nerds and Girls put, can he actually be 30 or do they have to be over 30? And I put over 30, but if you're 30 and 1 day, then you are over 30, my friend. So Gran Metalik counts. The Progress tag team of Bandido and Flamita turning up again. 5 Nerds and Go put an upscale Lucha House Party, but with a figurehead that they can all get behind. He was going to put Ray, but you think he would overshadow Almas? I disagree. And Keith, my good friend Keith, has put Andrade is the leader, but with no mask. The other 3 come out all in black mask and suit. Zelina does all of the talking because she's fucking class at it. But he is put, Zelina does all of the talking while Almas stands suited up with the title. He's too important to talk to you people. And I think both of these factions, obviously they're the same, but they've described them differently. But I really like how both of these factions would work. Keith, I completely agree. Imagine having Andrade coming out with 3 mass talents like Gran Metalik, Bandido and Flamita to begin with. I mean, that's a scary team. doing all your doggy work. But then having Andrade himself being the champion and have Zelina Vega, one of the best mic talkers in the business, just chatting shit for your faction the whole time. I really like that. So congratulations to Keith and 5 Nerds and Go. You are the winners of hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction this week. But thank you to everyone who took part. Congratulations to everyone who made the cut. And I cannot wait to see what we have coming up in the future on hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. Stay tuned this week at Omega_Luke on Twitter, where I shall post the next hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction for episode 3, where this time it matters. I want a top 5 or a top 10, depending on how many people actually enter and how many factions I think are worthy. So I can give out some points, and then we can start building a league table to see who is overall the best at hashtag Fantasy Booking Faction. So drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment down below who you thought was your winner, and make sure you are subscribed to the channel, of course. And one last thing from me is to keep your friends close, but keep Omega Luke even closer.